You now tuned in to the Gumptown Podcast. I'm your boy Doug B. We ain't got nothing to talk about, but we got something to talk about. Let's go. Good people. Welcome back to the Gumptown Podcast, episode 118. I'm your boy Doug B. If you tuned in to this podcast, thank you for your time and your attention. I really appreciate you giving this podcast a shot. Today's guest is the host of Mindful Nuggets podcast. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I'm sure we'll all be inspired by her story. Let's chop it up with Latasha Toney. Latasha, how's it going?
It's going great. How about yourself? Thank you for having me.
Glad to hear that, and all is well on my end too. First things first, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to chop it up with me. I really appreciate it.
Honored to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Of course, here to talk about Mindful Nuggets podcast and all the great things you're doing in that space. But before we go there, let's get to know the woman behind the brand. So you're born and raised in Beham. What was it like coming up in the 205?
Oh my gosh, it was amazing. When I was really small, I grew up in Woodlawn, so that town is just totally different now. I grew up in a neighborhood called Zion City, which is not really in existence now, but it was like a real family-oriented neighborhood, so everybody looked out for each other. Later on, I moved on to Roebuck, and that was just different. I really missed that Zion City neighborhood because people were just so close. You can go to somebody's house and borrow some sugar if you needed to. We would walk to the neighborhood store. It was just really exciting. I could just ride my bicycle, outside for hours. My mom had no idea where I was at. So I just really enjoyed that neighborhood. But things have changed over time. Birmingham has become a lot more progressive, but it's a great place. I'm glad to see that we've experienced so many different changes here. That was probably a long answer to your question.
No, that's fine. That's a great answer. And appreciate you for sharing your story and just your upbringing. Sounds like just riding those bikes. Those were good times. Like times were definitely different back then. I grew up in the 90s, 2000s. That was an era where we could ride bikes and stay out till the street light came on. So that was just different times. The world is taking a shift and good, bad, whatever you decide, you can name whatever direction you want to call it. I think the world is in an interesting place. I'll leave it at that. But those are good times. Those are great times. Sounds like you had a great village as well. Just hearing you talk about sharing sugar and things of that nature. Like, that's the thing I miss about back in the day, just that community. Sounds like you had that community around you.
Yes, we did. It was really beautiful.
Yes, ma'am. It takes a village on all levels when you're a kid, when you're an adult. So that's great that you had a great village behind you coming up in the 205. So you finish up high school there and go on to attend UAB. What led to the decision to stay home?
To be close to my family. I didn't want them to be burdened by having to pay for college. Because actually I wanted to go to FAMU or Hampton, but UAB was close. They had a major that I wanted to major in psychology. And it was a good school. So I was able to go there for free, basically. Because my dad was in the military, so I used the GI Bill for my education. So it worked out. And I really enjoyed the program. Like I said, originally I majored in psychology, but I didn't like that once I got to college. So I discovered social work, and I like that social work kind of integrated different social and behavior sciences, and compared to the other fields that require that you have a license. I was like, oh, that's great. So that's maybe going to the field. But UAB was a great experience. I was involved with an emerging leaders program during my first year. And I got involved with a social work organization. And I was also inducted into Phi Alpha Theta Honor Society for social work during my junior year, I believe, or was it senior? So it was a really great program. I had some really great instructors, great professors. I can reach out to them now if I need to. Because one professor knew me when I expressed interest in wanting to teach. I'm just getting all off topic here, but she remembered me from undergraduate, so that made her want to give me a chance. So I think I was a pretty good student. That just kind of helped me later on.
No, that's fine. That makes perfect sense why you decided to go to UAB. Like you said, go to school for free. I know FAMU was on the radar, but I definitely agree with going to school for free. I was in the same boat. I wanted to go to UA, but being from Montgomery, I went to Alabama State because it was free. and I didn't want to.
Yes.
I don't want to be paying Miss Sally Mae. So sound like we both made decisions just based on that, but everything worked out the way it's supposed to. So
Right. Mhm. Yeah, now I did have loans, but that's a whole nother story for a different podcast.
Mhm.
But now those have been forgiven, so praise the Lord. But yeah,
For
but
sure.
we'll talk about that later.
No
Different
worries.
episode.
No worries. So you got a chance to go to UAB, graduate, get your degree, and you got
Mm-hmm.
involved in some organizations. But just overall, what was that campus like from a student life perspective, parties and things like that? What was that like?
Wasn't into things like that because I really worked a lot when I was in school. Didn't really have to, but I wanted to. So I was a commuter. I didn't stay on campus.
Okay, sounds good. Hey, and once again, maybe one of those things that worked out in your favor because it all those distractions and party life and all that stuff. I did it at Alabama State and made it out. I know a lot of people get caught up in that party life and never make it out. So you just went to school, handled your business, and went back home. Much respect.
Mm-hmm. Yep. No, I did go to parties. I was just not on campus. Because okay, so we did have like one thing at UAB that I used to look forward to every year. It was like a Greek step show they would have every year, like in February. I would always look forward to that. That's probably like the only thing I remember. I think it's like during my freshman year, that was like right after Ruben Studdard won American Idol. So
Mm.
he did the halftime at our homecoming. So I went to that game. But that was like the only game I went to during college. But outside of those things, didn't really do a whole lot on campus.
All good, no worries. You went in there and handled your business, and you got your bachelor's in social work. Went on to go to UA to get your master's. So I'm pretty sure that you did. Were you an online student or were you commuting back and forth?
Oh, for UA, I did stay there for a semester. Then I did like a Washington D.C. program, and I ended up graduating from UA. So I was able to go to D.C. for a short time. That's another podcast episode too. But I ended up finishing my episode. I mean my internship. See, I just said episode. I have to cut that out. But I finished my internship at a different company. I was able to finish my. I had to start over with this. I'm so sorry. I feel like I'm just like I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay,
No apologies needed. It's all good.
ask your question again because I just kind of rambled off.
No worries. I was just saying, so when you went on to get your master's at UA, you actually lived in Tuscaloosa or were you an online student? What was that?
Okay, so I actually stayed in Tuscaloosa for maybe about 6 months. I did what's called a advanced standing program at UA, and that involves just going to graduate school for like a year because I had an undergraduate degree in social work already. So I started my program like in June, and I went like a summer term, then I went the fall term, and I the last part involves like your internship. So I ended up doing my internship at a company in Birmingham called Focus. It was through Gateway. So the company was called Gateway. The program was called Focus. But that went really well. But it was a really great program. I learned a lot. My focus was children, adolescents, and their families, just mental health from that perspective. So the interesting thing about working in the social and behavior sciences field, just going to school for it, it involves doing a lot of introspective work because you're working with people, and it's really hard to effectively work with people if you haven't done the work yourself. So I just really learned a lot about myself, from that program, and it just kind of helped me to be able to work with people later on.
Hmm. Wow, that's amazing. And like you said, to your point, you had to do the work. And that's the most important thing. We always have to put our mask on before we can help the next person, like they tell us on the
Yes.
airline. But
Mm-hmm.
that's amazing that you were able to have that experience, get a chance to intern, got a chance to T-Town. So did you attend any UA games while you were there, or were you just locked in on student mode?
I went to a homecoming game, so I have the pictures from that. They had a really great like Black student union organization there, and one time they brought in Farnsworth Bentley. Do you know who he is?
Oh yeah, that joke
Oh,
used to be fly back in the day. He used to be in all the Outcast videos. He had that drip
yes.
on.
Yes, they brought him in for some kind of discussion, and that was a really big deal. So those are my two main memories from the social life at UA.
Okay, sounds good. Now that's amazing. Thank you for sharing. So let's talk about mindful nuggets with Tasha T. So you got in the podcast space. What inspired you to get into this podcasting space?
Okay, so I actually had an idea to start a podcast back in 2021 because I wanted to be able to speak in different places, but I didn't have the opportunity to speak. So I thought I could just start a podcast. That could be my way to speak. Like I was blogging for a while, but I decided to start podcasting. I actually wrote the ideal down like back in 2021, but I did not start my podcast until February 2022. So like a whole year went by before I actually started the podcast. And so the time I started my podcast, I was in transition as far as my career goes. Like I still had a job, but I didn't have a full-time job because I had this one job. I thought it was going to turn to something really great, but it ended up not going well. And so I had the wisdom enough at that time to keep my job at this other company I had worked for like years. And I was able to be there, we call it PRM. Anyway, I had like all this extra time. I said, I need to actually just start my podcast now. And so when I started my podcast, I wanted to talk about faith and mental health, stuff like those things go together. So the name of the podcast was Mindful Nuggets. And mindful just means to be, in the here and the now, to be aware. I think a lot of times we get focused on things that happened in the past or get focused on what might happen in the future. But if we're just, mindful, it helps us to enjoy the present moment because the present is actually a gift and nuggets. So I joined this platform called Clubhouse back in 2021. And I kept hearing people say this word nuggets. So that's why I did mindful nuggets. Like anytime somebody says something like really insightful, say, oh, that person dropped some nuggets. So I was like, oh, that
Right.
sounds good. So mindful nuggets.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that. And that's a very organic way how you came up with the name Mindful Nuggets. And just in terms of what you're doing with the platform, talking about mental health, I think you're doing a great thing because in our community, people who look like you and I, mental health, it used to be taboo. It's being talked about more often nowadays. And I can specifically speak just from my own perspective, going to therapy and actually telling the therapist the truth and doing the work is one of the best decisions I've ever made. And I encourage all Black men, and I'm not excluding anybody. It's not about race. I'm a Black man, so I can only speak about Black men. So yeah, I definitely encourage Black men to go to therapy. So just in terms of you being a therapist, do you also go to therapy?
Oh, yeah. So I didn't talk about that. So I kind of alluded to this a while back. I was talking about being in that program in graduate school, how I did a lot of introspective work. I actually started my therapy journey around that time. I went to see a psychologist on campus. That didn't really go to like one session with her, but I ended up, so around this time, do you remember? I think it was 2011, April 27th, that tornado that went through Tuscaloosa and
Yes.
Pratt City,
Birmingham.
Birmingham.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. So I remember like being at work the next day and I was talking to my manager. I was like, wow, I was just watching the tornado last night and it just had me feeling so overwhelmed. I didn't know what to do. I feel so traumatized by it. And so she said, well, have you thought about talking to somebody about that? And I was like, no, didn't really. So my job at the time had employee assistant benefits. So I was able to see a therapist for like 24 times during a year without having to pay. Maybe wait. I think it was like 6 sessions for free. And then you could do another amount it was like a real low rate. So anyway, I started seeing a therapist around that time. And so yes, I have been seeing a therapist on an ongoing basis. I actually had to pause for my therapist recently, but I am going to be looking for a new one soon to just kind of work through some things.
Yes, ma'am. That's powerful. Appreciate you for sharing that. And I definitely remember that tornado when it hit T-Town because me being in Montgomery and just seeing it on the news. Of course, when you hear about tornado coming to Alabama, well, I'll speak for me. Like, I'm always thinking, well, you're probably going to touch down, do a little something, and go back up in the air. But the next morning when I woke up, and I saw everything that transpired, I was like, golly, like T-Town really caught it. And it's sad. So I definitely
Mm-hmm.
understand why you would start your therapy. So you started doing therapy back in 2011 when it was still taboo. That's amazing. You were ahead of your time, ahead of the time.
Yeah. Like the only people I knew who were going to therapists were white people. And they had like some real severe stuff going, which I mean, I think we kind of trivialize some things that we go through because everything is significant. But yes, I was able to identify some real deep things that happened. It just worked. Like I said earlier, when it comes to being a therapist right now, if I got somebody in front of me who has some stuff and it's like, having a broken ankle and somebody is coming to me. I'm like a orthopedic doctor. I have a broken ankle. I'm not going to get my ankle checked out, but I'm trying to teach them how to take care of their broken ankle. It's like, you're not, what are you doing?
Right. I definitely
So,
agree. And that's commendable that you put doing the work yourself first over giving out advice. Like I think that's great that you're doing the work yourself. And to be honest with you, therapy, like I was saying earlier, is definitely needed. But the most important thing about it that I learned after going to therapy for a couple of years now was when I sit down in front of my therapist, like I go in with the approach of being the villain. And the reason why I do that is because
ooh,
a lot of people go into it like I'm the victim, but that's what I was doing early on, Tasha, and I was just being told what I wanted to hear. But when you go in as the villain, like when you really take inventory of what you did, what you said, you can really get that golden advice that, like, yeah, that's why therapy has helped me do a 180 in a lot of areas of my life. Because when I first started going, this happened, that happened, they did this, they did that. Then one day it
mm,
kind of hit me. My therapist didn't say it, but it hit me one day when I was just sitting in silence. I was like, I'm not always the victim in my story. Like sometimes I'm the villain. A lot of times I'm the villain because a lot of things we go through, we allow it. We sit there and allow it, and then such and such burn me with the iron. But you sit there and let them burn you with the iron. I mean, metaphorically speaking. So,
ooh. I know that's good. That's so true. You're so
right.
right.
So, and I say that pretty much just to say, like, I'm pretty sure when you're sitting in front of somebody, you can tell when they're withholding information, and I'm sure you have a way of extracting the information in a sensitive and delicate way. But I'm pretty sure you deal with people that have sat down with you, and it's always one sided, but eventually you get to the bottom of it.
Mm-hmm. That
That's
does happen. It does. Right now, I work with adolescents, and they lie so much. Like, but that's
right,
their way of survival.
right,
They have to lie to protect themselves. So I'm like, okay, that's all right, but you don't have to lie. I don't tell them they're lying, like you said. So I just
right.
allow them to tell their story and just process and sift through all of it and reflect back what they're saying. And sometimes they'll eventually just tell me what was really going on. But
Right.
yeah.
So, just in terms of your own journey and going to therapy, were you always open and transparent from day one, or did it take some time for you to open up and really tell what was going on?
Um, it really just depended on the therapist that I was working with. I had this one therapist I was seeing. So I'm just like really funny about facial expressions. And she would make these certain facial expressions and it would just make me not want to be completely honest with her about things. But here recently, I have been more honest with people. I actually fired my therapist recently, and I sent her an email and told her why I was firing her. She apologized, but I was just like, that I just didn't think that it was appropriate. So, but it is important to be honest. I like what you said too about being the villain, because this was one thing that a previous supervisor said. And I thought was like really insightful, that when two people are telling you about something that has happened, you have two different sides to that story. So, like you said, you might have a villain and you might have a victim, but truthfully, we can play both sides. We can be the villain and the victim in the situation. But like you said, it's just important to be honest about the role that you play. Even if somebody did mistreat you, what did you do to allow that to happen? But yes, I am honest. I think that's just important to be that way with everybody. Not everybody is able to handle honesty though.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, it's very important to be honest because, in my opinion, if you're paying a therapist and you sit down with them every month, every other month, and you're not telling the truth, you're just wasting your money because you're just being told what you want to hear. Yeah, they wrong. Yeah, they did you wrong. But until you really just sit down, and I understand adolescents, they haven't made it to that level of maturity yet. So
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to necessarily tell you the truth all the time. So I'm not speaking towards them. I'm speaking towards adults like you and I. Like that's really the only way you get the most out of therapy. If you just sit down and really take inventory. Hey, you know what? Such and such did me wrong, but I'm always going over such and such house. So if I stop going over their house, they can't mistreat me. But go ahead though.
Okay, so you said something, and I know you didn't invite me on here to like therapize people,
No, no
but
problem.
one thing that I learned that I thought was really insightful doing my training in the last couple of years is that we have what's called a chronological age.
Mm,
So I'll just say, okay, I'm 38. So that's my chronological age. Then you have what's called a developmental age. That's between 1 and 18. So there are some people who are 38, but something happened when they were 10 years old and they're stuck in that developmental age. So when they're in a situation, they just default back to this is what my 10-year-old self would do. So that's the challenge of human behavior is that people, they got your 50, 60, 70, but they're still functioning as they would when they were in their 5 or 12-year-old body.
mm.
So,
No, and I appreciate you for sharing that. And you actually just unlocked something else in my mind with something in my personal life. So now I can start to make sense of certain things. Like, and I know this conversation isn't about, I'm not trying to get a free session out of you, Doc. I promise you. We just
fine,
we just
I got the bandwidth for it. So come on,
right.
invite
No,
up somebody.
no worries. I never thought about it like that. You have your chronological age, then you have your developmental age. So that makes sense as to at the time when I started going to therapy and just some of the things that I saw at a certain age made me feel a certain way about certain people. Man, I never thought about that. Like that's so powerful and that's great. I appreciate you for introducing me to that concept. That's going to help. It's helped me and I'm sure whomever hears this is going to bless them as well. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. That really helped me in my personal life as well. Just, being around people who they're not therapists, they don't have this training, they don't understand things, but just seeing their, behavior, how they might react. I'm like, okay, this person, might be this age, but okay, that thing happened to them and they really haven't moved past that. So that's why they're acting like that. Okay, I know that about this person. I'm not their therapist, but based off this information, how can I allow this to impact how I interact with them?
Yes,
So I might
ma'am.
have to go to that 12-year-old place. If this person was actually 12, how would I interact with a 12-year-old and
Mm.
just meet them there? So it requires a lot of patience, even some distance. But yeah.
Wow. Now that's powerful. That is so amazing. And one thing that has helped me to like complement going to therapy, meditation, like not in and not from a standpoint of sitting in a dark room and Indian style. No, just sitting in silence sometimes. Like instead of riding in the car with the radio on, just turn the radio off. Like, and a lot of people I believe would benefit from just sitting in silence, but a lot of us don't because I think we subconsciously know if we're sitting in silence, we have to face our darkest thoughts. We have to face us, and a lot of people don't want to face us, face
Right.
themselves. So that's so powerful and that's so amazing. But back to the podcast. So the podcast, you being a therapist, and for me, doing my podcast is a form of therapy as well. You feel the same way about your podcast?
I think it's therapeutic. I'm able to release some things. And just know that I'm supporting someone too who might benefit from it. But yes, I do think it's very therapeutic. A lot of my podcast ideas are very random. Like one I had recently, I was going through processing some things in my life from my own personal meditation, reflecting. And so I just had this thought about friendship and the type of friendships that I need. And that came out to be a podcast episode. So yeah, it is very therapeutic.
Yes, ma'am. And I would venture to say those thoughts that you have aren't random. They're intentional, like they're happening for a reason. And it's important that you follow up on those ideas. Good stuff, following up on that particular idea, because following up on an idea, that may be the podcast that take you from where you are to where you're trying to go, a household name, you know?
Yeah, so I ended up having like two different podcast episodes from that idea. I think one was just about the four different types of friendship, and one was about limiting beliefs around friendship. And so I just had this theme, okay, just talk about friendship for now. And I had all these ideas about what to talk about regarding friendship because I don't think we always know how to have healthy friendships. And we get focused on people being a friend to us, but we don't know how to be a friend to people because it goes both ways.
Hmm. Wow. That's that's amazing. And I see currently you're sitting at 18 episodes of the podcast so far.
I actually have more than that. I have like 40 something, but I took some down. I have to put them back because people are like, hey, I want to see that episode. I have to like re-air myself. Maybe I'll air it before the month is
Oh,
over.
you have 40 episodes. No,
I have like 40, yeah.
that's amazing because believe it or not, I was reading something recently like most people don't get past 90% of people don't get past episode 3. You have 40, so that's amazing that you've been staying consistent and staying on top of it. Because hey, I'm in the same boat as you. I'm still building the brand one episode at a time. And like aside from us having this interview, I just really just want to tell you good stuff. Keep going with the podcast because why not? I mean, we're here for a good time, not a long time. So share your thoughts and share it with the world. Share your gifts with the world. I think that's amazing that you're at 40 episodes.
Thank you. I just went to Apple. It said 47 was what I have
47.
total. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Amazing. That's good
Yeah.
stuff. So
Thank
you
you.
yes, ma'am. So of course you already talked about your aha moment, what sparked the idea and how long it took you in terms of the action towards getting started with the podcast. So we can go right into that third portion, audacity. It takes courage and audacity to not only act on an idea, but to put it out to the world to be praised or criticized. Who or what gave you that courage, that audacity to put mindful nuggets out there to the world?
God.
Nice.
I would say God was number one. And I kind of had some women who I connected with through Clubhouse who would encourage me. And I just knew again, so I think we discussed this during the pre-interview. But so I used to have a fear of public speaking. And I went to like Toastmasters years ago. And so, during COVID, like I was before COVID started, I wanted to do like more public speaking, but with COVID, it kind of limited that. So the podcast became a creative way for me to use my voice and I'm able to speak. So yeah, God, some women, it's just me, myself, I just believing that I could actually do it because it's one thing to put something out there, but it's just the internet is so scary. People can steal your ideas and give themselves credit for it. So just having to put all that stuff, in the back of my mind and, not even worry about that and just focus on, people really need to hear this. Like I would just tell myself, people need to hear what I have to say. So even you, people need to hear what you have to say. So just, that believing in myself and just, knowing that God gave me the gift to do this, believing in myself and just having people in my life who were kind of on a similar path, encouraging me. But I would just really say myself because I didn't always want to hear what people had to say, but I just, believed that I could do it. So I think when it comes to like the praise of people, it feels good, but it only lasts for so long. If you don't have that belief in yourself, human praise will only take you so far. So I hope that answered your question. I'm so long-winded. I'm sorry.
Oh, it's fine. I'm glad that you're comfortable with sharing, going into detail. I appreciate that. And you're right. That's all you need. God is all you need. God, and with God's guidance and self-belief, you can pull off anything. And you're right. The internet is a scary place. And one of the things for me, and you're absolutely right, people can't steal your ideas. I've just developed this mindset that if they're going to steal it, steal it. I have to put it out there because if I don't, then I'm doing myself a disservice. I'm cheating myself. And there may be someone out there. And that's really all I'm trying to do is reach one person and inspire them, not on some motivational stuff, but I just want to help one person build up enough courage to go after their dreams. Like if they're listening to me, it's like, you know what, you got a podcast, but they may not necessarily have a podcast in mind. They may have been wanting to start a online t-shirt brand. But if I keep going, I keep staying consistent, they're eventually like, you know what, if he can do it, I can act on my dreams. So yeah, people
Right.
people stealing ideas. It is what it is. Like the cool thing about it, Tasha, there's nothing new under the sun. So
Mm-hmm.
we all are inspired from other places and other people and other
That's true. That's true. And so also I've just kind of followed people too on social media. I see what they're doing. Like there's actually one therapist I follow, and I was like, she just has some really great stuff. And I was actually able to connect with her. So, but I say people's praise is not important, but I think having a tribe is very important as well. Because it's really easy to find critics, but it can be challenging to find people who are just genuinely supportive of you. So just looking for those people and just really having those real connections with them, not trying to have a transactional relationship with people. So yeah.
Right, absolutely. And to your point, just in terms of finding that tribe, it goes back to what we talked about earlier, just having that village, being in the right village, being around the right people. Like you need a village at all levels of life when you're a
Yeah.
child, an adult, even in this podcast space. Like, and that's great that you're tapped in with other therapists and you watch other creators because I do as well. I pay attention to the landscape and I may see something like, oh, such and such doing that. I'm not going to steal his concept, but I have a similar concept that I can put my own spin on. As long as you not copying somebody's style verbatim, I don't think they'll trip. As long as you can put your own creative spin on it, it's all good. And the cool thing about it, Tasha, we're all different. We all have different experiences and perspectives. So 9 times out of 10, two podcasts won't ever sound just alike. Like
That's true.
Gumptown podcast, Mindful Nuggets podcast, because we have different perspectives. People are here and they'll get something different from each podcast. So, but I say all that to say that's great that you tapped in with a tribe, a village. That's amazing.
Thank you. And I think you were talking about therapy. I don't know if you asked me how has therapy helped me, but I guess that's been something that I've been able to embrace more through my journey is that it's okay to need people. It's okay.
It is.
For different things. And it's actually better when you have people. Because when you don't, it's rough out here. And so just being open to different ways that people can be supportive. So
right. Absolutely. And you're spot on with that. You definitely need people. Because one thing I heard a long time ago from Dr. Eric Thomas, he was talking about no man is an island. And I didn't understand that then, but I get it now. Like none of us are not like we can't make it by ourselves. It takes collaboration. It's going to take a team. It's going to take a village. So that's amazing that therapy has helped you realize that. And I'm in the exact same boat because there was a point in my life, Tasha, where I felt like I didn't need anybody. I could do this by myself. But in truth be told, you can only get so far by yourself because your mind, you don't have. Well, I'll speak for me. I don't know everything. I don't know everything. So by me expanding my network, expanding my village, I get different insights, different perspectives from different people. So that's great that therapy helps you in that realm. Let's talk about vision. You've done great things with the podcast. I know great things are coming down the pipeline. What are some of your short-term and long-term goals for the podcast?
So one thing that I explored during the end of the first year toward the second year was just doing online workshops. So I did like some grief workshops, and Thanksgiving is coming up. I think this might air after Thanksgiving, but anyway. So I'm doing a Thanksgiving and grief workshop, and I have one in December. It's going to be called "What Do the Lonely Do at Christmas?" So people who might be, single and they're struggling, they might have feelings of loneliness. I want them, to just kind of come and have some support. So that's going to happen on Monday, December the 18th, I believe, at 7. So there will be a Facebook event regarding that. And if people want to just reach out to me, I can send them a link if they want to come to that. But I just want to do stuff like that, have those online support groups. I really want to do more in-person stuff. So hopefully I have more in-person opportunities. I actually did get notified recently that I was approved to do a presentation at this big conference in February. So I'm looking forward to that. So just want to do more in-person stuff. I really have an interest in doing like organizational consulting regarding mental health. So that's a goal that I hope to make into a reality, some point in the next year or so. But those are some things.
Yes, ma'am. That's great. Those are great short-term and long-term goals. And I have no doubt you'll make them all come to fruition.
Thank you. You're so kind.
Absolutely. And I also think it's great that you're doing the holiday grief centered events. That's important because a lot of people do go through that this time of year, and people need to be in those type of environments. So that's great that you're creating those type of safe spaces. Talk about holiday grief because it's definitely real. And I think that's amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So I started this podcast to highlight the greatness connected to Montgomery. I know you're from Birmingham, but what's your knowledge of Montgomery?
ASASASU. Okay.
You know something.
You know what? I said I wanted to go to FAMU or Hampton, but I also wanted to go to ASU because I like their band. So I have always been an ASU fan. So that's my connection to Montgomery. And I have a friend that lives there too. So
much respect. That's good stuff. Wow, that's amazing. So Tasha, how can the people connect with you? What are your social media handles?
Okay, so I just changed my Instagram name to the Highly Flavored Therapist. Flavored because I'm just learning to embrace my uniqueness. That's why I chose the word flavor. But anyway, the Highly Flavored Therapist on Instagram. Or they can also email me at mindfulnuggetspodcast@gmail.com. I also have a page on Facebook that's called Mindful Nuggets Podcast. So those are 3 places.
Yes, ma'am.
Oh,
go ahead.
And my podcast is on Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, Audible. So they can look for it there, the Mindful Nuggets Podcast.
Yes, ma'am. Sounds good. And of course, I'll put all of the information in the description of the episode. Hey, Tasha, thanks again for the conversation. I really appreciate you.
Thank you for having me. It was great talking to you.
Likewise. Good people, that concludes another dope episode of the Gumptown Podcast. In the meantime, in between time, y'all know what to do. Be blessed, be safe, but most importantly, have the audacity to be you. Go on. Thanks again for tuning in. I appreciate your time and your attention. Until next time.